What happens when an undercover boss walks into his own store to see how things work? It might sound like something from a reality show, but sometimes the most unexpected truths hide in everyday places. This story begins on an ordinary Tuesday morning when a man wearing a simple blue hoodie strolled into a bustling electronics shop. He blended with the crowd, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. No one paid him special attention, which was exactly what he wanted. They knew him as Mike, but his real name was Richard Edwards, the CEO of this retail chain. He was there to observe, listen, and discover what truly happened behind the scenes. His heart pounded, wondering what he might find. He wandered to a display of headphones, catching snippets of employees chatting with customers about the latest deals. A greeter at the door offered a polite smile, but didn't linger. Everyone assumed he was just another shopper. Richard had chosen this specific location because it was both busy and diverse in its clientele, a perfect cross-section of the change challenges. His plan was simple: spend 2 days incognito, gather honest feedback about daily operations, and see if customer complaints aligned with reality. He needed to know how managers handled staff, how staff treated each other, and what customers experienced from the moment they walked in. Right away, he noticed a line forming at the help desk. He drifted toward that line, trying to appear casual. A small commotion drew his attention. An older woman stood at the front, her hands shaking slightly as she held a malfunctioning smartphone. The young employee assisting her had a name tag that read Ryan. Ryan spoke in a warm, steady voice, explaining technical details with admirable clarity. He reassured her they would get her phone back to normal, then navigated menus step by step without any sign of impatience. Something about his calm demeanor struck Richard. Retail can be chaotic, yet Ryan's approach radiated kindness and genuine interest. Even as the queue grew, he remained focused on the woman's needs. Richard, standing nearby, felt a flicker of curiosity. When that woman left, smiling timidly, Richard stepped up. He feigned confusion about transferring photos from a phone to a laptop. "Mind helping me?" he asked, sounding unsure. Ryan's eyes sparkled with empathy as he nodded. "Of course, sir." He walked Richard through each step, never talking down to him. Throughout the demonstration, Ryan asked if he was following along, offered tips for storage, and smiled with an authenticity that put Richard at ease. After finishing, Richard thanked him and casually asked, "You always this patient with customers?" Ryan shrugged, a modest grin on his face. "They just need someone to slow down and show them how things work. That's my job." Intrigued, Richard asked, "So, do you enjoy working here?" Ryan hesitated, glancing around as though weighing how candid he should be. Finally, he replied, "I do. It's not always perfect, but I get to help people figure out stuff that confuses them. Feels good." Richard nodded, trying to coax out more. "Any problems? Areas that could be better?" Ryan paused. "Maybe staffing during rush hours. Management wants us to hustle, but sometimes we just don't have enough people." He offered a quick smile. "But I get it. It's retail." That frank answer impressed Richard. It wasn't bitter, just honest. He thanked Ryan, then stepped away, pondering the sincerity in that brief exchange. Something told him Ryan might be important to this story. Richard continued roaming the aisles, watching employees explain features, handle returns, and restock items. Most customers seemed satisfied, but subtle tension lingered in the air, like employees had to rush, even if they wanted to spend more time with each person. Around mid-morning, he slipped into the break room unnoticed, though the steady hum of conversation suggested staff were unwinding during short breaks. Hidden behind a row of lockers, he sipped from a coffee cup, listening. 2 employees complained about scheduling chaos and inconsistent management. "They don't see us," one said. "Corporate sits in their fancy offices making decisions without knowing how we struggle." Richard felt a pang of guilt but stayed quiet. Then they mentioned Ryan. "He's too nice," one muttered. "Makes the rest of us look lazy." The other huffed. "He's always covering extra shifts. I heard he's got big bills at home. Maybe that's why he tries so hard, needs the hours." A pause. Or maybe he's angling for a promotion. Richard found himself hoping Ryan's motives were genuine. Hearing these rumors, he wondered if Ryan was facing hardships yet still chose to help others with a smile. That was the kind of employee any CEO would want to support, but first Richard needed to confirm these whispers. He left the break room quietly, determined to observe Ryan more closely. On lunchtime, the store swelled with new customers. Ryan bounced between the phone section and the TV displays, guiding a mother and son with a broken laptop, then assisting an older gentleman who needed a voice-enabled device. Richard watched as Ryan walked the gentleman through instructions, even writing notes on a slip of paper to help him remember. The gratitude on the customer's face was undeniable, and Ryan's smile was equally genuine. It wasn't forced or performative. Richard felt a jolt of admiration. As Ryan turned to help someone else, his manager Harold stepped in with a stern look. Richard inched closer, sensing conflict. Harold said, "Ryan, you're supposed to be in the phone section, not wandering." Ryan's face flushed, but he kept his composure. He needed help and no one else was available. Harold frowned. "We have quotas to meet. You can't take forever with one customer. Move faster." The remark stung Richard. Didn't Harold see that Ryan's thorough approach was actually winning customer loyalty? Ryan nodded, "Yes, sir," and returned to his assigned area. Harold stalked off, never glancing at the satisfied gentleman Ryan had just assisted. Richard resisted the urge to reveal himself right then. He recognized that if Harold's style was to rush empathy out the door, it might reflect a broader issue in the company's culture. But before making conclusions, he needed more evidence. Late in the afternoon, Richard hung back near the storeroom, trying to avoid suspicion. He overheard Ryan speaking softly to another employee. The co-worker sounded distressed, mentioning overdue medical bills for his child. Ryan responded in a reassuring tone. "I know it's tough. My mom's hospital costs are huge. That's why I pick up extra shifts. We'll figure something out. Don't give up, okay?" The other voice trembled with relief. "Thanks, man." Richard felt his heart tighten. So Ryan wasn't just nice to customers, he offered emotional support to coworkers too. And there it was. Confirmation that behind his dedication lay real hardship. Richard quietly walked away, shaken by how little corporate policy addressed these struggles. When the store closed, Richard waited in the parking lot, watching employees head to their cars. Under a flickering streetlight, Ryan tried to start an old sedan that groaned and failed. Richard approached, cables in hand. "Need a jump?" Ryan looked surprised to see him, but nodded gratefully. "I appreciate it." They hooked up the cars and the engine sputtered to life. Ryan thanked him, looking worn. Richard gently asked, "Long day, huh?" Ryan shrugged. "Better than some," he said with a faint smile. Richard wanted to offer more help but worried it might blow his cover, so he only said, "I saw you working hard in there, it shows." Ryan's eyes flickered with something like hope, but he just nodded. That night, in a modest hotel room, Richard dropped the facade and let his thoughts tumble out on paper. He scribbled ideas on how to fix the disconnect between management and staff, how to provide meaningful resources for employees like Ryan, maybe a company waste relief fund, or better scheduling practices or specialized training for managers who lacked empathy. He realized corporate success demanded more than pushing for maximum efficiency. It required a genuine understanding of employees' lives. Ryan's story revealed how personal hardship could coexist with professional excellence, and how a single worker's kindness could elevate an entire store. Richard felt both regret and determination. He regretted not seeing these issues sooner and felt determined to rectify them. The next morning, Richard decided it was time to unveil the truth. He entered the store early, wearing his usual hoodie and sneakers, but resolved to approach Harold directly. The manager spotted him near the front and offered a perfunctory, "Can I help you?" Richard dropped his voice. "Yes, actually. I'm Richard Edwards, the CEO." Harold froze, eyes widening. "Sir? Mr. Edwards? I had no idea." Richard nodded. That was the plan. Employees nearby fell silent, sensing something big. Harold looked both panicked and confused. Richard gestured calmly. "Let's talk in your office." Inside the cramped room, with papers strewn about, Harold seemed unable to sit. Richard calmly shut the door, then faced him. "I came undercover to see how things really run here." Harold swallowed hard. Did you find what you needed? Richard's gaze sharpened. In part, I saw hard-working employees, but also saw questionable management approaches. Ryan, for instance, was reprimanded for spending time helping customers. Isn't that what we should want our staff to do? Harold mumbled. We have performance metrics, sir. We have to keep things moving. Richard shook his head, controlling his frustration. Metrics are important, but they can't replace empathy. We risk losing good people if we treat compassion like it's an obstacle. Harold nodded, sweat beading on his brow. Understood. I can adjust. Richard exhaled. We'll make company-wide changes, starting now, but first I want to talk to Ryan. Outside, employees craned their necks. The CEO was here in casual clothes, pointing toward Ryan. Richard approached Ryan, who looked both startled and curious. Richard extended his hand. You know me as Mike, but my real name is Richard Edwards. I've seen how you work, and I'm impressed by your dedication. Ryan's eyes widened. CEO? So all that time, you were just… Richard nodded. Undercover, I wanted the truth. You gave it to me. Ryan swallowed, clearly uncertain how to respond. Richard continued. I learned about your situation, your mom's medical bills, your willingness to pick up extra shifts. I heard how you encouraged others who felt hopeless. Ryan's cheeks reddened, but he stood firm. I just wanted to help. Touched by his humility, Richard said, We need more of that spirit in this company. I'm promoting you to a supervisory position with better pay. Also, we're establishing a fund to help employees facing emergencies. Your experience made me realize we've overlooked something vital, the well-being of the people who keep our stores running. Ryan's eyes glistened with tears. He tried to blink back. Sir, that's incredible, thank you. A hush fell over the store as curious onlookers realized something important was unfolding. Richard turned to them. I want everyone here to know that we're starting immediate reforms. We'll be providing more robust benefits and creating a relief fund. Good work shouldn't be overshadowed by personal hardship. Applause broke out, some employees cheering quietly while others stood in stunned silence. Harold shifted, offering a tentative smile. He extended his hand toward Ryan. Congrats. I'll support you however I can. It wasn't the warmest gesture, but it was a start. Ryan nodded politely. Richard then gathered everyone near the registers, outlining a rough plan. Flexible scheduling, better communication channels, and the immediate setup of a relief fund for pressing medical or financial crises. He promised details would be coming soon. Nervous optimism spread among the staff. Could this be real? Ryan, still overwhelmed, stood at the edge of the group, absorbing the moment. When it was over, he quietly approached Richard. I can't believe this. It feels like a dream. Richard shook his head. You've earned it. And we need your perspective to make sure we do this right. Keep speaking up. Ryan gave him a grateful smile. I will. For the rest of the day, Richard stayed in the store, no longer hiding who he was. He chatted with employees about their experiences, took notes on customer feedback, and observed Harold attempting a gentler management style. Meanwhile, Ryan, now recognized as a leader in training, guided anxious staff through complicated returns and tricky phone setups. Customers seemed to sense the change too. A woman at the counter said, "Everyone here is so patient." The positivity was tangible, a ripple effect of empathy. When the day ended, Richard returned to his corporate office. Over the next weeks, he worked tirelessly to implement these new policies. There was some corporate pushback, concerns about cost, fear that employees might exploit the relief fund. Richard tackled each objection with data and moral conviction. A happy staff is more productive, he insisted. When people know the company has their back, they go the extra mile for customers. That's a win for everyone. Eventually, he got enough board members on his side to launch the initiative. Company-wide emails announced the new relief fund, improved insurance options, and a renewed emphasis on employee well-being. Retail workers across various regions reacted with cautious excitement. True to his word, Richard made sure Ryan received a raise, better hours, and mentorship to flourish as a supervisor. Ryan approached the role with the same kindness he'd shown as an associate. He gave tips to employees on how to handle stressed customers, reminding them, "They're frustrated because they need help. We can be their solution if we just listen." He also quietly offered emotional support for coworkers struggling with finances or medical woes, directing them toward the new fund. In time, that single store's morale soared. Harold, initially taken aback by the changes, gradually adapted, noticing fewer angry customers and less employee turnover. Months passed and the relief fund proved its worth. One cashier used it to cover her child's sudden hospital expenses. Another employee avoided eviction thanks to a small, low-interest loan. Word spread that the CEO had literally walked among them and heard their conversations. Folks started calling it the Undercover miracle, half in jest, half in genuine admiration. Sales went up, partly due to better service and partly because employees felt safer recommending friends to work there. Ryan's mother, meanwhile, received crucial treatments she couldn't previously afford. Her gratitude was immeasurable. She even wrote Richard a thank-you note, tearful in its sincerity, praising Ryan for his unwavering spirit. Over time, Richard visited other stores, sometimes with minimal announcement, but never fully undercover again. He'd learned that trusting employees to speak freely could only happen if they didn't fear retribution. So he made a habit of open Q&A sessions, encouraging staff to voice their concerns. "We can't improve if we don't know what's broken," he'd say. Executives noticed his new leadership style and began emulating it, leading to a chain-wide cultural shift. That once cloistered feeling of us versus them started melting away. Customer feedback improved as well, with repeated comments about kindness and thorough assistance. The bottom line remained healthy, even thrived, under this more compassionate approach. The day Ryan was officially named supervisor, the staff celebrated with a small get-together in the break room. Someone brought cupcakes, someone else hung a simple banner that said, "Congratulations, Ryan." He blushed at the attention, humbly deflecting praise. Richard, who'd stopped by for the occasion, laughed and said, "No use deflecting, Ryan, you've earned it." Applause followed. One colleague teased, "Just don't forget us when you're running the whole place." Ryan chuckled, "No way, we're in this together." He caught Richard's eye, and they shared a nod of mutual respect. Stories about the store's transformation reached local media. A small news station ran a segment about Richard's undercover visit, focusing on Ryan's personal struggles and the resulting company changes. While Richard wasn't seeking publicity, he saw the positive headlines as an opportunity to encourage other companies to do the same. "If we can help even one more business discover the power of caring for its employees, that's worth it," he told a journalist. Comments online were largely supportive, with some people expressing hope that more CEOs would follow his lead. Others remained skeptical, but Richard felt proud that tangible improvements had been made for the workers he now knew by name. One evening, after a particularly long day at corporate, Richard found himself reflecting on how it all started. Had he not overheard that conversation about medical bills, he might never have realized how dire employees' situations were. That single spark changed everything, reminding him that behind every name tag stood a real person with dreams and worries. Remembering Ryan's words, "Don't give up," Richard felt a surge of gratitude. He wasn't just running a business anymore, he was fostering a community. In that moment, an old saying from his father echoed in his mind: "A company that forgets its people forgets its soul." Meanwhile, Ryan thrived in his role. He continued to exude patience and genuine empathy, now guiding newer hires in the same manner. Customer satisfaction kept rising, and repeat business increased. Ryan's mother, having benefited from the improved insurance and the relief fund's short-term support, stabilized in her treatments, and her prognosis looked better every month. On days off, Ryan still covered extra shifts when urgent needs arose, but this time it was out of choice rather than desperate necessity. He never lost that warm smile or the ability to listen first before jumping to a solution. Employees frequently mentioned how working under a leader who understood their struggles changed the entire store's vibe. Richard's next challenge was to sustain these changes across all branches. Some locations resisted, especially where managers were set in their ways. But the success story in Ryan's store served as proof that empathy and profit weren't mutually exclusive. Gradually, a handful of other store managers implemented the relief fund, altering schedules to reduce burnout and encouraging open dialogue. Corporate reports showed declines in turnover, fewer customer complaints, and an uptick in net promoter scores. It's simple, Richard explained at a board meeting. When employees feel cared for, they care more about their work. That leads to better service and loyalty. It's not rocket science, it's basic human decency. Toward the end of that year, Richard decided to host a company wasted town hall meeting streamed to every store. He invited Ryan to speak, wanting frontline perspectives to reach every corner of the organization. Ryan, nervous but honored, spoke about how compassion had saved him from a financial and emotional tailspin. He described the relief fund as a lifeline for employees who otherwise felt alone. He didn't sugarcoat the job's challenges. Retail was still demanding, but emphasized that people were now more willing to work together instead of just clocking in. We're building something real here, he concluded, and that's worth fighting for. After the live stream, messages flooded in. Employees from distant states sent thanks. Customers who got wind of the event chimed in on social media, praising the chain's approach. Even competing retailers began asking about how to replicate such a model. Richard was happy to share insights. Pay attention, he advised. Your employees will tell you what they need if you make space for honest conversation. His final note in those discussions was always the same. None of this would have happened if I hadn't stepped onto the sales floor, hoodie and all, and listened to people like Ryan. Time rolled on, and that electronics store remained a shining example. Ryan's team turned it into a hub for local charities, occasionally running donation drives and workshops for seniors in the community. Each initiative seemed to echo the core message. Caring was contagious. New hires quickly absorbed the store's supportive environment, and older staff members felt motivated by the fresh energy. Harold, having transformed his management style, even caught himself praising employees more often than he criticized. It wasn't a forced change. He genuinely saw how positivity spurred better results. Near the anniversary of Richard's initial undercover visit, he dropped by the store without any big announcement. This time he wore a crisp button-down instead of a hoodie. Ryan recognized him immediately and came over with a broad smile. "Welcome back, boss." Richard gave him a playful nudge. "Careful, I might be undercover again." They both laughed. Richard took in the lively scene, employees eager to assist, customers asking detailed questions, everyone seeming at ease. It felt like a small victory, not just for sales figures, but for human connection. Ryan pointed to a corner where a coworker was demonstrating a new gadget to an elderly couple. "See that? We always take our time now." Richard watched as the demonstration concluded with the couple beaming. "Amazing," he said quietly. "This is what happens when we care." For a moment he recalled how he'd once overheard a heartbreaking conversation about medical bills, how he'd seen Ryan scolded for being too thorough, how Harold had worried only about speed. Now the store thrived precisely because employees could give customers the attention they deserved, and in return employees themselves felt valued and supported. Richard realized that was the core he'd been missing. You can't separate business from the people who drive it. You either succeed together or fail apart. Stepping outside, Richard felt the crisp evening air on his face. Before he left, Ryan caught up to him in the parking lot. "I just wanted to say, none of this would have happened if you hadn't come down to see us in person," he said softly. Richard shook his head. "Maybe it wouldn't have happened the same way, but your kindness is what sparked the biggest changes. You showed me what I needed to see." Ryan's expression grew serious. "You listened, though. Plenty of bosses wouldn't." Richard smiled at that, thinking back to all the times he'd sat in boardrooms, trying to interpret data without hearing voices from the floor. "Well, I've learned my lesson." They shared a final handshake that evening, a moment of profound mutual respect. Then Richard headed to his car, feeling that steady pulse of gratitude. He had discovered a crucial truth. Employees are not just line items in a budget. They're human beings with hopes, fears, and boundless potential. Once recognized and supported, that potential could uplift an entire organization. In his mind, he replayed a quote popular among older generations: "If you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers." It rang truer than ever, and he couldn't help but feel a swell of optimism for what might come next. Looking back on this journey, there are lessons for all of us. True leadership isn't about issuing orders from a high-rise office. It's about stepping into the world your employees inhabit, seeing the obstacles they face, and working side by side to remove them. Compassion is not a weakness, it's a powerful force that can transform workplaces. When companies invest in their people, they create a ripple effect that benefits everyone: customers, communities, and the employees themselves. And ultimately, an act of empathy, no matter how small, can trigger a wave of positive change. Just ask Ryan, who proved that one person's kindness could wake an entire corporation. Just ask Richard, who learned that going undercover was the best decision he ever made.